Okay, time for a new video. Welcome back to my channel, or hello if you're new. This is yet another Eurovision 2026 related video here on my channel, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the news that has come out over the past few days, / the past few weeks regarding the ESC, and possible withdrawals from the 2026 edition of the Eurovision Song Contest, which as we all know will take place next May in Vienna, Austria, because of JJ's win in Basel, Switzerland earlier this year with the song Wasted Love. As always, you're welcome to let me know your thoughts on anything I discuss in today's video by leaving a comment down below, and as always there are links in the description to my other social media pages. Check them out if you so wish. I want to make it clear right now, this video is probably going to be all over the place. I have various websites loaded up and ready to go. I'll be reading from those websites shortly, and credit must go to the writers of those articles. Now, as we are all aware, Eurovision has been a bit of a shite show for quite some time now. Things are very tense and uneasy, to say the least. Last year in Malmö, Sweden, Israel took part, and that was the big elephant in the room. It was the most controversial element of last year's competition. We also had Joost Klein disqualified for the Netherlands right before the grand final. That was controversial. But really the biggest talking point was Eden Golan singing Hurricane for a country that maybe shouldn't have been involved in the lineup in the first place. Nevertheless, there she was. She sang well, despite the song being, in my opinion, incredibly lackluster, a song that in any other year may not have seen the light of day in the grand final. And when it came to the public half of the results, she was right up there, very close to winning the public vote. Only Baby Lasagna for Croatia was ahead of her in the end, and it was a fairly small margin of victory in the public half of the results. After the competition, as we are all very much aware, all of this information started coming out from various artists and delegations, saying how there was a great deal of tension, unease, unhappiness, dissatisfaction, not a great deal of communication perhaps between certain artists and delegations and the European Broadcasting Union themselves. People like Sylvester Belt and Bambi Thug were quite vocal about this, and I think on the day of the final itself last year, I just think the whole experience was maybe not that great for several of the artists involved because of what was happening behind the scenes. Now, we know a little bit, but we don't know everything. What we do know is that it wasn't fantastic. And you would have thought, given what is happening in Israel at the moment, and indeed what was happening back then, being at war, the situation over there is a shite show as well, you would have thought the EBU would have said, okay, the contest is maybe not ticking along as nicely as we'd like with Israel taking part. There's this whole thing in the rules about bringing the competition into disrepute. Is Israel's participation doing that? I don't know. Perhaps. But anyway, last year, there they were, and like I said, they nearly won the public vote. This year, there they were again, and the controversy came back with a vengeance, and a few more delegations and a few more broadcasters weren't happy about this and said so. But in the end, everybody took part, and this time Israel did win the public vote with another remarkably lackluster, thoroughly dreary, coma-inducing number, New Day Will Rise by Yuval Raphael. Once again a great singer, but the song, goodness gracious me, shouldn't have been anywhere near victory in the public half of the results, or indeed victory full stop. Let's not forget, this was the runner-up of this year's competition behind JJ for Austria with a far superior effort. I think for anybody watching the grand final this year, now, of course, there are people out there very much supporting Israel at Eurovision. I acknowledge those individuals, they do exist. But I think for the majority of Eurovision fans this year, certainly I speak on behalf of myself, watching the results this year, particularly after that huge public score for Israel came through, it was very uneasy. Some of us were starting to think about, okay, if Israel do win this, what happens to Eurovision next year? What happens to Eurovision moving forwards full stop? Because it's not great. Israel won't be able to host next year. If they say they're going to, you're going to have a lot of countries pull out. How many artists are really going to want to go over there for such an event? All of these questions very quickly were starting to pop up in our heads as the results were starting to come through. Then, of course, JJ won in the end, and a lot of people breathed a huge sigh of relief. Graham Norton, the British commentator, sort of alluded to the controversy in his commentary during the grand final, saying that the EBU avoided a huge headache, something like that. And he was absolutely right to say that. It would have been even more of a shite show had Israel come out on top this year. But what we saw earlier this year was a situation where the public half of the results were so skewed for reasons of pretty much a purely political nature. Politics has always been there in the Eurovision Song Contest, and now it feels as though it's encroaching upon this competition in a way that it hasn't for a very long time, if ever before. And I think the concern for a lot of Eurovision fans moving forwards is the same thing going to happen again next year and the year after? If Russia were booted out because they were at war with somebody, should Israel be booted out for similar reasons? I don't know. This is why it is a complete mess. And I think the EBU dawdling on this matter, because that's really what they're doing, farting around, waiting to maybe put together some sort of statement later in the year. This messing about isn't really helping anybody. There needs to be stronger clarification. Delegations and broadcasters are wanting this clarification, and we as fans want to know what next year's competition is going to feel like. Is it going to be more of the same, or is there going to be less controversy? That would be quite nice, wouldn't it? Now, I'm rambling on about any old thing, so let me take a look at some of these news articles. I'm going to begin with an article that has appeared on the BBC website earlier today. You may well have seen this. This is written by Adam Mandeville, and it regards Ireland threatening to withdraw from Eurovision if Israel participates. So I'm going to read some of this aloud to you now. The Irish broadcaster RTE has said it will not take part in the 2026 ESC if the participation of Israel goes ahead. In a statement, RTE said that Ireland's participation in the event would be unconscionable given the ongoing and appalling loss of lives in Gaza. Ireland has won the contest 7 times, most recently in 1996. RTE will make a final decision once the organisers of Eurovision, the EBU, makes its decision. This is probably going to be later in the year. We do not know what's happening behind closed doors. I would assume the EBU are regularly talking to all of the broadcasters who regularly take part in the Eurovision Song Contest and gathering opinions from all of them about what to do regarding this particular difficult situation. Given the broadcasters that have already piped up about this, I think it is a blossoming headache for the EBU, and they need to act on it fairly swiftly. If we don't have some sort of decision, I would say by the end of September, it's not going to look great at all. I think the sooner a decision is made, the better. It benefits so many of the other broadcasters. It benefits the fans. We just want that communication to be very, very clear. Now, I know that the EBU made a little bit of a statement recently, which I might have loaded up, I'm not entirely sure. But we need more. We need a further statement. We need answers. Next year's contest will be held in May in Vienna. Slovenia's national broadcaster RTV SLO has also said it will withdraw from the competition if Israel participates. We really could have a situation next year where we have one semi-final. And I think that would be really disappointing. It would feel like such a humongous step back for Eurovision. And I don't think anybody wants that. But anyway, Spain's culture minister, Ernest Urtasun, has said that his country may also not take part should Israel participate. Stefan Eriksson from Iceland's national broadcaster RÚV said its involvement in next year's contest was subject to the outcome of the ongoing consultation process within the EBU due to the participation of the Israeli state broadcaster CAN in the competition. Mr. Eriksson added that RUV reserved the right to withdraw from participation in it if the EBU does not respond satisfactorily. In a statement yesterday, the Irish broadcaster RTE... that's today, sorry. In a statement today, RTE said it is RTE's position that Ireland will not take part next year if the participation of Israel goes ahead, and the final decision regarding Ireland's participation will be made once the EBU's decision is made. Really, this is a case of, are the EBU willing to keep one country in and let many other countries clear off for a year, 2 years, however long? Or are they going to say, actually, we want as many countries as possible to take part every year, and if that means booting a certain country out for reasons that we can understand, surely, so be it. It added, RTE is also deeply concerned by the targeted killing of journalists in Gaza, the denial of access to international journalists to the territory, and the plight of the remaining hostages. Prior to this year's Eurovision in May, RTE did ask the EBU for a discussion on Israel's inclusion at Eurovision. At that time, the Director General Kevin Backhurst said he was appalled by the ongoing events in the Middle East and by the horrific impact on civilians in Gaza and the fate of Israeli hostages. I don't know whether I mentioned this earlier because my memory is terrible, but we had a situation a few years ago where Russia went to war, and fairly swiftly they were booted out. And a lot of people, perhaps rightly so, are saying, well, what's different this time? What exactly is different between what Russia did, / still doing, and what Israel did, / still doing? And, you know, I've said before on my channel what I think, which is that it is clear with Israel's continued participation that the competition's strength and the enjoyment people get from it is definitely weakening. And it is in the best interests of the majority if Israel do not take part in the event. It's as simple as that. Kevin Backhurst added that he was mindful of RTE's obligations to maintain objectivity in covering the war in Gaza. Earlier this year, more than 70 former Eurovision contestants signed a letter calling on the organisers to ban Israel from this year's event. So there you go. Now, on the RTE website, I don't think it says a great deal more. Apparently, though, the National Union of Journalists has welcomed the announcement. In a statement, the union said its members working in RTE supported the decision not to take part if Israel is included. The NUJ, National Union of Journalists, said it strongly welcomes RTE's clear statement that it would be unconscionable for Ireland to participate next year and believes the stance reflects the views of staff working at the broadcaster and those of the Irish public that we serve. The union also called on other European broadcasters to follow suit and on the EBU to suspend Israel from next year's event as a matter of urgency. There has been growing controversy about Israel's participation. Along with Spanish and Slovenian broadcasters, RTE had sought consultations, so on and so forth. Doesn't really say a great deal more there. Now, as for Slovenia, this article is on WeWe Credit to David Smith who wrote it. The director of state broadcaster RTV SLO has said it's unlikely they will return to the song contest after being repeatedly ignored over their various concerns by the EBU. Her comments came during the broadcaster's annual planning session when it discusses upcoming shows and productions. Ksenia Horvat first discussed the production of a new show which would be a selection method for Eurovision 2026. Now, as you know, a lot of things have happened from April onwards, she said. There were quite a few calls from us to the EBU asking they talk more with us, with smaller television stations, about what rules it has for participating in Eurovision. We sent some very specific questions and proposals just like last year. Last year we were more or less ignored. That's a damning statement right there. Because here you have somebody who works for a national broadcaster saying that the EBU who oversee this huge event aren't listening to its members, or at least one of its members. And that is a massive concern. This year is basically the same, so we realistically think that we will not be able to go to Eurovision. If we won't be able to reach an appropriate system of participation, we will not be there. It means that the series of talent shows that would select the entry would no longer have a purpose. This individual sent a letter to the EBU expressing concern over how Israel's participation has shifted the dynamics of the contest, making Eurovision anything but apolitical and unifying. Unfortunately, the response we received did not contain convincing or concrete explanations. I imagine it's all vague, wishy-washy stuff that's coming out from the EBU at the moment towards these broadcasters. There's nothing set in stone. It probably says something along the lines of, "We will get back to you." Nor did it reflect the urgency and seriousness of the issue we are addressing. During this time, the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories has worsened, and public concern, both in Slovenia and throughout Europe, has increased significantly. Many viewers in Slovenia and elsewhere expressed serious doubts about the credibility and transparency of the voting. The voting definitely needs reform. I think all Eurovision fans would like there to be some tweaking to the voting moving forwards. I think, for me personally, the juries need to be back in the semi-finals. And also there needs to be maybe a little bit of tweaking regarding how many times you can vote for a certain country. I should say the BBC have recently said that phone voting will be scrapped for Eurovision moving forwards. Anyway, the feeling that political interests could influence decisions on participation or the final vote results has shaken public trust in the impartiality of the EBU. We are particularly interested in comparing telephone votes with online votes, as we believe this is essential to restoring trust in the integrity of the voting process. As a public media organisation, we have a duty to provide our audience with accurate and verifiable information. Television Slovenia is under increasing pressure to respond to these concerns. If the EBU does not take concrete steps and address these issues, we will be forced to reconsider our participation in future Eurovision events. We will be compelled to take this step if the EBU continues to ignore these key concerns. We are calling for an open, inclusive and urgent debate among EBU members, including music performers and civil society representatives, on voting transparency, engagement policies and the consistent, credible implementation of the EBU's stated values. Couldn't have said it better myself. So Slovenia may not be taking part next year. What about Spain? This is on the Eurovoix website. During an interview on La Hora de la Uno, Urtasun stated that Spain should withdraw from Eurovision if Israel is not excluded. I don't think we can normalise Israel's participation in international events as if nothing is happening. It is interesting that there is a lot of controversy surrounding Israel's participation in Eurovision. There doesn't seem to be nearly as much controversy, but then again I'm not looking at any information about this. But Israel are taking part in other international events. They've been involved in qualifying for the World Cup. They've been taking part in a basketball tournament recently. I'm sure there is controversy, but it seems as though with Eurovision that's really where that controversy is bubbling up and causing a lot of tension. Events like Eurovision or the Vuelta a España brings a certain representation of a country. In Eurovision's case, it is not an individual artist who participates, but someone who participates on behalf of that country's citizens. This man's comments about the Vuelta a España come after several protests during the current edition of the race, which I am familiar with. Urtasun clarified that this decision is up to RTVE to take. At the time of writing, Spain is due to take part next year, with Benidorm Fest scheduled for early next year. That article was written by Neil Farron. And then we have Iceland, who have perhaps been the most vocal about Israel's continued participation. It is likely, this is by Stefan Eriksson, who said, and I think I might have said this earlier, I think it is likely that if there is no change in the EBU's position and it does not respond to these voices of concern coming from us, from Spain and Slovenia and others, then that will call for reactions from these broadcasters, but let's just wait and see. We have serious doubts about the conduct of both the Israeli public broadcaster and the Israeli government when it comes to Eurovision, and we have expressed these concerns within the EBU that the rules of the competition are being broken. Songverkeppningen is scheduled to take part next year. That article written by Anthony Granger, just for the record. I'm going to see if I can find Martin Green's actual statement. I think it's here, bear with me. This is on the Eurovoix website again. So here we go. He was talking to the Danish broadcaster. He said, "We understand the concerns and deeply held views around the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. We are still consulting with all EBU members to gather views on how we manage participation and geopolitical tensions around the Eurovision Song Contest." I said this earlier. What's probably happening behind the scenes is the EBU are communicating with all broadcasters who regularly take part in Eurovision and getting their opinions on it. And maybe they're waiting to see if the majority of broadcasters are unhappy about it, then they can release a statement saying, okay, we're going to boot Israel out. If less than half, who knows? Who knows? But if less than half, maybe they'll be like, well, actually, they're going to be allowed to take part again next year. Then it says, broadcasters have until mid-December to confirm if they wish to take part in next year's event in Vienna. It is up to each member to decide if they want to take part in the contest, and we would respect any decision broadcasters make. You've got to think about the future of the competition. It's the 70th anniversary next year. It's supposed to be this great, joyous, big bash event. You don't want it to be completely clouded over with further controversy, more dismay, unhappiness, political stuff happening behind the scenes. You want it to be a great, big, vibrant, happy time. And at the moment, I think a lot of people maybe aren't expecting it to be that way. I think that's all Martin Green said about it. That Eurovoix article by Anthony Granger, by the way. I don't really have much else to say. Really, I'm just filming this video to relay information that you're probably already familiar with. I've given you my fairly brief thoughts, and I'm interested to know what you think about this. Based on what I've seen online for the past 2 years or so now, most people are very, very disappointed and upset at Israel's participation, and there are genuine concerns that the same old thing is going to happen again next year. The way I see it, there's probably 3 or 4 possibilities. Possibility number 1 is that Israel are booted out fairly soon. Next year's competition goes ahead as normal. No country withdraws. If anything, some countries return. Option number 2 is Israel take part next year and several broadcasters withdraw, no countries return, or there are no new debutants, and that means we probably, I'm stumbling over my words now, we probably have only one semi-final. Option number 3 is Israel take part, as do all of the other broadcasters as per usual. It's all talk, no action. That's definitely a possibility here. And then option number 4 is Israel withdraw, and so do many other countries because of dissatisfaction with the EBU. There's various possible machinations here. At this moment in time, I do believe Israel will be kicked out of Eurovision. I can see it happening now, especially because you have an automatic qualifier like Spain piping up about it. And I think if Spain are threatening, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but if Spain are threatening to withdraw, then that could be a big problem for the EBU. That's the loss of a big viewing audience. That's the loss of a very strong and welcome identity at the Eurovision Song Contest. Yeah, I imagine behind the scenes it's just such a mess. But the EBU have really only got themselves to blame for this. If they had taken swifter action sooner, maybe we wouldn't have to be talking about this right now. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Feel free to leave your comments down below. It goes without saying, but please be respectful of everybody's opinions. A bit of a messy video from me, but I wanted to film it. And I'll be back in the near future with more Eurovision 2026 related content. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye for now.